Hey guys, Samia here, wedding photographer, and I thought it would be really fun and helpful to make a video about what lenses I use on a wedding day. There's so much that goes into choosing the right lens for each part of the wedding day, and I have some pretty concrete ways that I do things for that. So I decided to make this video. So if you're here, make sure to subscribe and we'll get right into the video. So really quick, I do have a bunch of email templates and free pricing sheets and stuff like that for wedding photographers in the description below. So if you haven't already, make sure to grab your copy. All right, so let's go ahead and look at this wedding together. So let's start with the details. So what I use for all detail shots is a 50 millimeter. And I have other videos here on YouTube about wedding day details, but I always shoot them vertical and then I will come in and crop them to be horizontal like this one. So that keeps the gallery cohesive when it's all, for details, the same lens. Okay, so this is Candid, the bride, getting ready. So what this is actually a 50 millimeter for all the vertical shots and then a 24 to 70 millimeter for shots like this. So what I'm doing with that is I have two flashes on my camera as I shoot these. So that's kind of for all of the Candids. And then for the bridal actual portraits, I'm using the 50 millimeter here again for all of these, and the same here, 24 to 70 millimeter for horizontal. So what I'm doing is I'm using 50 millimeter for all my vertical photos like this one, and then the 24 to 70 for all my horizontal photos, with the exception of if it's something like her coming down the staircase. I actually shot this at 24 millimeter vertical, which I usually don't do because it slightly skews the photo, but I had to do that because the space was so tight and I wanted all of this in the vertical shot. So things like that I make an exception for. Okay, so let's talk about the ceremony. So same thing for the ceremony, kind of. So what I use is I keep my 50 millimeter on one camera, 24 to 70 on the other camera. That way I can get both vertical and horizontal shots of people coming down the aisle. Especially when the bride is coming, I will switch cameras as much as possible to get both. And then the same for her, like from the back. So this was like a 50 and this was like a 24 to 70 shot at almost 24. So once this exchange happens up at the front, the bride says, they're now standing, and he lifts the veil off and they're now standing facing each other. I actually switch the 50 to the 85 millimeter. That way I can get a little bit closer. So that this is shot with an 85 millimeter. Actually, this wedding is a good example to show you because there was no electricity, so very minimal lighting in the church. So these were all shot with 85 millimeter. I always use my 85 for ceremony reactions like this. So that is for 85 millimeter on my one lens until the kiss. For the kiss, I will switch back to the 50 on one camera, 24 or 70 on the other, and I'll do everything on the 50 vertical and 24 to 70. Always when they're exiting and walking out, I try to keep it as wide as possible because I think this was a shot even at 24. You can always crop in, but you can't invent the rest of the picture. So that's what I use for the ceremony. Okay, so let's go to bride and groom photos. So after the ceremony, 50 millimeter for all the vertical photos. This is a good example because it was raining. So all these are vertical, and then 24 to 70 for anything you see that's horizontal. And that really kind of complements the gallery well. I mentioned in my What's in My Camera Bag video how you see how the coloring is pretty consistent. I found, so like this is shot with a 24 to 70, and then moments later this with a 50 millimeter, and they're both made by Canon. So I think that I have, found the rule there where if both lenses are made by the same brand, then the lighting is very similar. So that's how I got all of these, just those two lenses. And very, very similar concept for the bridal party. I'll shoot 50 millimeter vertical, 24 to 70 horizontal. The only thing to mention about the bridal party is I always do wide shots for when they're walking, like things like this. But also when I'm doing, sometimes I do, for these individual photos, I'll switch the 24 to 70 to an 85. So I can get this on the 50 and then that on the 85. So I can alternate between those two. So that really helps me get like photos like this and then this without me having to move, and everything looks consistent, and without the bride moving, the gallery will look consistent because each bridesmaid is just kind of like filing in. So that helps me get a good variety with individual photos as well. Okay, so for the reception, I'll use a variety of things. At first, when the reception starts, I will use my 24 to 7. I have both cameras still on, 50 and 24 to 70, but I'll use the 24 to 70 first, and I try to go to each table, put it on a really high aperture, or like 5, and get a photo of each table. And it doesn't matter what the lighting kind of looks like too much because I edit it afterwards. I just have to make sure that they're in focus. So I'll go around and do that, and then with the entrance, whether or not I'm doing the 50 or the 85 here really depends on the space. Usually it's an 85. This was shot with an 85 for speech reactions. So speech reactions I pretty much can do on one camera because I can do the speech on the 85 and the reaction on the 85. And then for this particular wedding I had 85 and 50 on. So this was shot with a 50 horizontal. So that is what I do for speech reactions and speeches. What I also love to do is with the 85 at receptions is close-ups on glasses and things like that because I think it adds something to the day. I can also do another video on this. Was a softbox was in front of them over here on the side. That's what gets this to look kind of like their faces to pop from the background a little bit. So I can make another video on using a softbox. Okay, so I'm switching over to a different wedding for a second. So these are details from a different wedding, same thing, all shot on the 50 millimeter, and it makes it look really consistent. But I wanted to show you was dance, like first dance coverage and stuff like that. That previous wedding I was showing you didn't have any a dance floor. They didn't have dancing. So for dances, I used an 85 millimeter for all of this, and I shoot it all vertical, and then I can crop it to be horizontal. So what I mean by that is this original photo is a vertical photo, and I've cropped it to be horizontal, and this is using a softbox as well. But I use 85 for all of this because the first dances, like there's so many crucial half-a-second moments that I don't really like changing cameras or lenses. So that's what I do for the first dance, special dances. Okay, what I also wanted to show you was using the softbox for reception decor. So I use the 50 millimeter, I use all 3 lenses for reception decor. So I'll start with 50 millimeter on the softbox, going around doing like the full tables, verticals, and the chairs. And then I will do close-ups with the 85, like this was shot with the 85. Trying to get like these were all 85, these like closer up images. This was an 85. So I'll go back between 50 and 85 for these and the close-up, and then once I do all of that, I will do detail wider photos at either 35 or 24 to 35. So I'm using just those 3 lenses for all of the reception decor stuff. Okay, so I wanted to also show you dancing. So for the dancing coverage, I use the 24 to 70 as wide as possible usually, and I'm using some flash forward techniques here. So that's what I use to get like wide of 2 people, 3 people together dancing, usually full body or waist up. It's kind of like how I like to photograph it. The other lens that's on my other camera is the 85 millimeter, and I do like to keep that lens on to get people sitting at tables, like grandparents from far away like this. So I use the 85 pretty much for people not on the dance floor, and I think because the 85 is so far away, they never really like notice. So I get a lot of like good candid photos of people at receptions that aren't noticing, and then occasionally I'll use the 85 for fun. This is the 85 on the dance floor, but that was just kind of me messing around. But all of these are really shot with the 24 to 70 wide. And I think it's the perfect lens for horizontal dance photos. And then if you're going to switch to the 85 millimeter any point at receptions, the other camera, good for people sitting at the tables. So that was a lot of information. Leave a comment, let me know, what do you photograph similarly? What lenses do you guys like to use for when? I'm actually really curious. And if you haven't already, make sure to subscribe. I come out with new videos for photographers on topics like this every week. And I will see you guys next week here on YouTube.